Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean go solo live? Have you ever been asked why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Before we get started, today I have two announcements about exciting things going on with Transform Via Travel. The first is the launch of our first group trip. I've partnered up with Kelly McDermott from A Path Less Taken, and we're planning an amazing trip to New Zealand in January 2019. For more information, go to bit.ly, bit.ly link, /WENZ 2019. It's all lowercase letters, WENZ 2019, and follow us on Facebook at Transform Via Travel for more information about an upcoming question and answer webinar. Also, I've just launched an online program called Get Ready, Get Set, Go Solo, designed to help the first-time solo traveler get unburied from all the research and actually start traveling. For more information about the online program, go to bit.ly/ready-set-solo. That's bit.ly/ready-set-solo. And that information will also be included in our show notes. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Hello, sisters, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. It's time to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy my conversation with Ronda Taylor as she shares stories about how she answered the question, what if you just bought a one-way ticket and figured the rest out when you got there? Joining me today is Ronda Taylor. Welcome, Rhonda.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, here is relative because I'm here in Milwaukee and you're here is an entirely different part of the world. Where are you right now?
I am in Medellín, Colombia.
Tell us a little bit about Medellín.
I absolutely love Medellín. What I love most about Medellín is the climate. It's called the City of Eternal Spring, and it's because it's like a day in May, every single day of the year. It rains a little, the sun comes out, and it doesn't snow. It's like the climate here is just perfect. And the beauty that surrounds it, there's just so much green. There's a really progressive, vibrant community here, and I have fallen in love.
Well, I've only been to the urban area of Colombia in Bogota, capital city, and the climate there was very different. I actually dressed for spring, and it was much cooler because of the elevation. There was a lot that I learned very quickly. Why did you pick Colombia?
I didn't actually pick it for any one reason other than during my travels, I happened on Colombia because we came from Panama through the San Blas Islands and landed in Necoclí, Colombia. I have been traveling throughout Central and South America, so Colombia was on the list. I didn't know how much I was going to fall in love with it. I didn't know how magical it was going to feel for me. And I left. I continued on my travel. I went to Peru, went to Ecuador. I went to Peru first. And then I actually kind of started feeling a little off. And I booked a trip and came back to Colombia for like a month. And I got grounded, I felt settled, I was more productive. And then I went back to Peru to finish the rest of my journey through Peru. But for whatever reason, Colombia just keeps calling me back. And so this is now the third time here. And I knew when I went back to the States for a brief time, I knew I was coming back to Colombia. I cried all the way home. I cried like a baby all the way home on that flight. And Colombia has just captured my heart.
Now, this is interesting because, as you shared with me before we got started on the interview, you don't even speak Spanish.
Poquito. Yes, very little Spanish. I spoke zero Spanish when I first started this journey. It became very apparent to me very early on in the journey that I needed to know Spanish. And so I have been practicing Spanish, and now I have a tutor that I work with on a regular basis. So my Spanish, fortunately, is getting much better, and I'm able to communicate with the locals a whole lot easier than I used to.
Well, immersion makes it a whole lot of a different experience than what you learn on an app or what you learned in high school, for sure.
Completely. And actually, I took like one semester of Spanish in junior high. We won't say how many years ago that was. However, I wish that I had continued. I didn't realize the importance of knowing a second language back in the day.
You're not alone. You're not alone. And again, as times have changed and the world has gotten smaller, I think some of those expectations have changed as well.
Absolutely. I agree.
Well, I'm going to rewind the clock a little bit because your story of how you actually started traveling is one that I think a lot of our listeners can relate to. And share what you will, but you made a pretty big life decision and had a lot of things going on. Can you take us back to that time for you?
Sure, absolutely. So I am from Las Vegas. Well, I'm originally from Colorado. However, I had been living in Las Vegas for the last 10 years. And I was in a marriage that just wasn't fulfilling either of us anymore. And it was becoming increasingly difficult. We each brought 3 kids to the marriage, so we raised 5 of them collectively. They were all now out of the house, had been for a few years, and I recognized that I had just kind of lost myself. And I was living this really unhappy, unfulfilled life, doing everything I possibly could to make it better, personal development. I have amazing friends in my circle and my tribe, and it just wasn't working. You know, this whole thing started actually 8 years ago. As a book designer, I was designing a book for this woman who had traveled the world. She took a year off and volunteered and traveled the world. And I was so inspired by that and blown away. It's like, I didn't even know that such a concept existed. It's like, wait, what do you mean you took a whole year off and just traveled the world volunteering? And volunteering is very near and dear to my heart. I was an active volunteer in Las Vegas, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. So I had designed this book, and as I was going through these pages and I'm reading everything and I'm learning so much about her journey, I'm like, oh my gosh, because it has been my lifelong dream to travel. I was a very young mom. My life took a very different turn. And so I didn't get to pursue that dream of travel that I'd had all those years. I felt what felt like obstacles, always getting in the way. But yet you have this inner knowing that you should be doing something different.
Yes.
I had done this book many years ago, not many, 10 years ago. And that thought had never left my mind. And so now fast forward to I'm in Las Vegas, and it's been 8 years and I wasn't really happy. I knew that there was a book inside me. I knew I wanted to write a book. I knew I wanted to travel the world, and I knew I wanted volunteering to be part of that. I didn't know what anything else looked like. So I'm in my mastermind group one day and I'm frustrated, and I kind of just throw it out all on the table. And I'm like, okay, I'm looking for clarity. I'm looking for direction. I'm looking for solutions. I'm looking for anything. This is what I want to be doing. I have been saving for years trying to make travel happen for me. And there was a very dear friend of mine sitting across the table, and she said, so what would it look like if you just bought a one-way ticket and figured it out from there?
Oh, those are really powerful words. And, she asked a beautiful coaching question in that moment.
Yeah.
But because I had a visceral reaction to that. I'm like, oh, what would that look like? Holy cow. How did your body react? How did your brain react? How did your heart react?
There was absolute silence. There were tears. And my reaction created a reaction to everybody else. And there was just silence. I could feel everybody staring at me because my reaction must have shown something, because what I felt inside, it's like there I was, equal parts excited and equal parts terrified. It's like I had to ask myself in that moment, it's like, how bad do I really want this? Because I had created so many obstacles about why I didn't have it yet. And every obstacle with her one question, every obstacle was removed. And I was sitting at the table, absolutely stunned. And I'm thinking to myself, could it really be this easy? And guess what? 2 weeks later, I bought a ticket And within 39 days of my friend asking that question, I was on a plane to Costa Rica.
Okay, so the doubters are going to take their moment, and I welcome the doubters because that means that they probably need this more than others. What did you do in those 39 days? You took 2 weeks, you chose a destination, a starting spot, which is also nice.
Yes.
Is to think that it doesn't have to be my forever spot. It's just a place to start.
Exactly. The meetings take place every 2 weeks. By the time the next meeting took place, I announced I had bought a ticket. From that point forward, I had sold everything I owned and I left my 23-year marriage.
Part of how I started doing some of my travel was that a relationship that I had ended as well. And I will say that a relationship doesn't end in 2 weeks. It doesn't end in 39 days. I think they decline over time. Possibly it wasn't what it was supposed to be from the beginning, and our view of it changes over time. But still, that does seem fast, and there were children. Not necessarily babies, of course, but
Right.
there was still family to consider.
Absolutely.
So how did you approach that transition?
I didn't mean to make it sound like I woke up one day and went, and I'm out of here. So,
And you did it.
And I did it, right. Things had been slowly deteriorating probably over the past 5 or 6 years of my marriage. He wasn't happy, I wasn't happy, and we really, really both deserved to be happy. And no one was making a change. No one was making a decision. No one was taking action. And we had tried many things. It wasn't for lack of trying. So over the course of many years, and yes, our kids were all adults by then. They were all out of the house. And it just became a decision that I knew I had to make because nobody else was going to make it. And I knew that at the age of 53 at the time, I could not live one more year being unhappy and not fulfilling my own dreams. And so I just made the decision that this is the way it needed to look for me, that I really needed to begin a new chapter in my life. And so what I created was a journey of self-discovery and awareness and really finding out who I was, because I had lost myself for so many years as a mom and a sister and a daughter and a grandmother and all of these things. I really did not know who I was anymore, and it became my priority.
You're really echoing the sentiments that I share every time I do a public speech. I talk about the roles that we take on and then the associated expectations with those roles. And I think you had said something earlier about finding yourself. And I actually think that our self is a part of us that we need to actually nurture and explore and caretake. If we don't, it gets chipped away. And I love that you made the choice and you decided to pursue it in a way that was going to work for you, because this might not work for everybody.
Right. And I also want to mention, I didn't leave the marriage. We didn't part ways, so to speak, angry. It's like we are still friends. We still stay connected. It's still an amicable parting of the ways, or at least it is in my view. I think it's really important to note that this decision was not made in anger or with vengeance or with anything like that. It was just really looking at myself and going, I really want to know who I am, because who I am right now doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. And there has to be more out there for me. And honestly, at the time, there was always that possibility of going out and venturing on my own and maybe waking up going, wait a minute, what am I doing? What have I done? I should just go back. That was an option.
Absolutely.
It wasn't my intent. However, I didn't know what my future looked like. I've never traveled out of the country by myself. I've never traveled anywhere, quite honestly, out of the country. And so I didn't know what anything looked like. All I knew is I had a passport and I was going to go figure it out. And a one-way ticket, a one-way ticket to Costa Rica. And that's all I knew.
You could create it along the way, just like that question was posed, and you were making the rules.
Yes. And that's exactly what I did. The only destination I knew that my immediate future held was that I was going to be living in the jungle of Nicaragua for my first month. And that's what I did. As I said before, volunteering is very near and dear to me. And, I also made the decision that this was going to be the opportunity for me to start writing the book that I had always wanted to write. And I wanted to write a book about what female entrepreneurship looks like in developing countries. And for whatever reason, Central and South America were called to me. And everyone asked me, why? Why Central America? I don't know. It was just an intuition. It was just a feeling. One of my volunteer experiences happened to be in a yoga ashram in Nicaragua outside of San Juan del Sur. And so I was going to be volunteering with this woman for a month, cooking, cleaning, doing gardening. I mean, I became a master with a pickaxe. I'm building steps. I'm digging trenches. I built a sink out of concrete. I did gardening. I was attacked by scorpions. I mean, you name it, it happened. But truly what I really wanted was, because I knew that it was a yoga ashram, I knew that it was going to be a place where it would give me an opportunity to get balance. Like, I really wanted to feel grounded. I wanted to be balanced. I knew that yoga was going to be a part of my everyday life. I knew that meditation was going to be a part of my everyday life, which is something that I've been doing for many years anyway. But having that opportunity to do it in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by monkeys and sloths and critters, and just having that really, really rustic, natural experience, I embraced it. And I could not have made a better choice for myself, because I was able to completely get connected and grounded to me before I moved on to the unknown, because I had no plan after that. Zero.
Well, and I think, like you said, you took the time to get recentered for yourself, and you did it in a way that felt natural and authentic to you.
Absolutely.
And so that's like self-care at its ultimate. You were giving, you were in an environment that suited you and that you had some experience with, but it was still fresh and new. And that exact type of outcome that you get from doing that, everybody would be getting in their own unique way.
Absolutely. It was definitely a personal experience for everyone.
I love that. Once you had that first month, what did you do after that?
So while I was in the jungle, it became very obvious to me that I needed to learn Spanish, like muy pronto. Because it was in the jungle where I'm realizing, okay, Rhonda, what have you done and what's next? So there were other women there, and I had met some really beautiful young women who were backpackers. Through conversation, I learned about different parts of Nicaragua, and I had been referred to a Spanish school in Granada. And so it was during the course of those conversations with my friend that she gave me all the information, sent them an email, I contacted them, and I had Spanish lessons set up by the time I got to Granada. And so that's really kind of where my journey began, as far as this whole new world that was outside of a jungle, that was like in communities, and really getting to see how people live and what other parts of the world look like, and the opportunities that came my way. When everything falls into place every single time, you're on the right path. You align it with the journey that you're on. It's true. It's really true. And so my next destination was Granada, and I stayed there longer than I had anticipated. However, I stayed there and took Spanish and got to see the sights a little bit, met some beautiful people, actually got an amazing opportunity to go to a poetry retreat through my home mom's best friend. And it just became an amazing journey after that.
As you approach this type of lifestyle and you're starting out on your journey, and you have to start making some decisions about what is coming next for you, how do you get motivated to do that when you're probably pretty comfortable doing a new daily routine, almost like we get comfortable at home?
Exactly right. And this was such a new experience for me. I really didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know what was next for me, but I kept hearing this voice inside, and it just kept telling me it's time to move on. It's time to move on. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know where I should go. I didn't know how I should get there. And yet that inner voice just kept kind of nagging at me. And so the first step started in having to make that decision, but I kept changing my mind. kept changing my mind. I kept going back. I'll give you an example of one of my experiences. So after a month, I'm now in Nicaragua for a month. I had only planned to be there for 2 weeks because that's how long my classes were. So I traveled to Granada. I only planned to stay for 10 days, actually. 5 weeks later, I knew I needed to make a decision to move, but I was complacent. It's like my intuition, my inner voice was telling me, Rhonda, it's time to move on. Yet I kept putting it off. So until one night, I'm walking uphill out of my neighborhood and I'm on my way to meet new friends for dinner. And I'm happy and it's a beautiful evening and I'm just on my way. I've got my cell phone out and I'm looking at the map directions on my phone. And the next thing I know, my cell phone is ripped out of my hands by this young man racing toward me on his bicycle.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And like in this nanosecond moment of like fight or flight, I like knocked him clean off his bicycle.
Wow.
Yeah. And as he's lying on the street, he's injured, he's bloody, he's unable to move. I like promptly walked over to him. My heart is pounding out of my chest. I grabbed my cell phone, which was on the street laying right next to him. And I just picked it up and I threw a few curse words his way. And I just continued on my way to the restaurant. But it's like by the time I got home, I was the talk of the entire neighborhood. It's like everyone was looking at, because there were onlookers that had seen what had taken place. So by the time I got home that night, people were talking, like women were approaching me, and you can tell. That's when I knew it was time to move on. So I had made a decision, and by the next morning, I was on my way to my next destination. Like it was that fast.
Well, there's something to be said for deciding is one thing and action is entirely different. So once you make a decision, if you're not really willing to take the action associated with it, it's like, does the decision even count?
Exactly. And it really came down to, do I want to make the decision for myself or do I want to have the decision made for me?
Right.
And I knew in that moment, I no longer wanted to have decisions made for me anymore.
No, that was a good sign. It was a good sign you had an amazing reaction to the situation. That's very impressive.
I don't even know how that happened. I'm grateful that it did because my cell phone is my lifeline.
Right.
Yeah.
I think many would feel that way. And it really could have been a terrible situation and you nailed it. Literally, I think.
Yeah, he was not able to move. He was really injured because he was coming down a hill at a very high rate of speed. And he just went flying one direction, the bike went another, and I went, and I think it's time for me to go.
Wow. Well, again, and there you are. And I love that. So part of that is, again, being open to almost like the signs from the universe, right? We don't always pay attention until it almost smacks us in the face.
Yes, it was a terrifying moment. However, for me, it needed to happen that way. You know, sometimes you just have to smack me in the face and go, okay, Rhonda, it's time to wake up and make a decision.
Yes.
I learned a lot from that experience.
Well, and that's all we can be asking for right now is that you were safe and it was an opportunity to learn and a little bit of reflection of, you know, I don't know how I did that or I don't know what my strength was to do that, but I did. And what would I do different next time? And all those kinds of things, like those are all wake-up calls. And again, you were spurred into action.
Yeah, so many lessons, you know, and the one lesson I took away is that one path to happiness is to face your fears.
Beautiful.
Because in order to face your fears, you have to leave part of your life that is safe and comfortable. Even if it's that little bit of time that you spend in one place that was not previously familiar to you.
That's a good point. It makes a lot of sense. You've been at this for a while. What do you see coming next for you? And you're also pursuing a project that's very important to you and near and dear to your heart. So as you're talking about where you're traveling next, how does this project tie in as well?
One of the biggest questions I get is, how are you making a living while you travel? So I work as a publisher and a book designer and a book coach. The term is digital nomad when you're working remotely. So I'm working as I'm traveling. However, this book that I've been writing has really turned into a passion project for me. And I have a Facebook group called Heartwork Travels. I've been sharing my stories and my adventures and my videos and all of the crazy fun things that have happened. And also, it's a space for me to be really vulnerable because not every day is sunshine and rainbows. Yes. So Heartwork Travels has become really near and dear to me because it's really about wanting to make a difference in the life of others and empowering them enough to become better versions of themselves. In however that looks, nobody has to drastically make a change in their life like I did. However, this book has really become important to me because what I'm doing is I'm interviewing women as I'm traveling in all these different countries, and I'm volunteering with them, I'm living with them, I'm working with them, and I'm really getting connected. So Heartwork Travels has become like just this beautiful passion project for me, and I know that there's so much more to this that I just haven't quite put my finger on. But my heart is telling me that there's so much more to this because this is a lifestyle that I have really come to love and embrace. I didn't know I was going to love it this much. I knew I had the dream to travel my whole life, but I didn't know that it was going to make me feel like I do every day when I wake up and my heart is so full of love and joy and bliss and happiness. I just didn't know that feeling like this every day was possible.
So the people that are hearing that, because as soon as you started proclaiming your love for it, I'm like, because you wake up with your heart full and then you said it. So I can totally relate. But you have loved ones you've left behind. And I don't mean that you've abandoned anyone in any way because they're grown. They're living their own lives on their terms, which is exactly what people should be able to do. But how do you stay connected to those who have depended on you and need you to be part of their lives?
Well, that is where I am extremely grateful for technology. Internet technology has kept me connected to my kids and my grandkids and my mom and my sister and my family and my friends. And that has really been so vital for me because one of the things that has really become so important to me, not so much an epiphany, but when I realized the sacrifices that I've made, it was my decision to leave. I made the choice to sell everything, leave the country, leave my kids, leave my grandkids to pursue a life that I have dreamed about my whole life. So it's days like on Mother's Day when I'm reminded that my kids aren't with me and I'm not with my mom. And those are the days that are tough. However, I have 3 amazing children who support every ounce of my journey. And I could not have done it had I not had their support from the beginning. Because we had a little powwow and I said, okay, this is what I want to do. And every one of them said, Mom, I love you. I will miss you like crazy. But I know that you have wanted to do this your whole life. You have put your life on hold to raise us, to take care of everybody else. It's now time for you. And that was all I needed to hear. So I stay connected with my kids and my grandkids through video chats, which is no different when I lived in Las Vegas because I've got kids in California, my grandkids are in California, my kids and my mom are in Colorado. So I wasn't near anyone. We were always staying connected through video. That part really isn't any different. The only difference is they're not seeing me 2 or 3 times a year. Now they're seeing me once or twice a year.
And like you said, in some ways, if you weren't living right next door and helping with grandkids and stuff like that, and even if you are, that doesn't mean that you can't make these choices. And you're still able to create relationships and maintain them the way that you're doing this because it's not that much different than what you were doing before.
Absolutely. And really one of the main reasons for me even doing this is I want to create this legacy for my kids and my grandkids. I want them to see, I want to lead by example and show them that if you follow your dreams, if you take action, if you pursue what you really, really want to be doing in your life, anything is possible. And so they're watching me live my dreams. It doesn't mean that their dream is the same, but what's important to me is that they see that it's possible because they know my circumstances, they know my life, they know me, they know what I left behind. I even left behind a mother who now has Alzheimer's. And I had a conversation with her too, because I love my mom with everything I have, and I was her caretaker for many years. And when I made the decision to leave my life as I knew it, changes had to be made. So she went to Colorado to stay with my sister. But I had a conversation with my mom and said, okay, this is what I want to do. And she said, Rhonda, you have wanted to do this your whole life. Do not let me and my circumstances stop you from living your life. I will be just fine. And we stay connected. We do video chats. We talk on the phone. And it's difficult. And I know that I have her support. I know that I have her love. My mom has been my biggest cheerleader my whole life. And her life is changing every day.
And you've left her in good hands.
Absolutely. Because I have a brother and sister who are more than capable of helping as well.
And having been a caretaker for a short period of time and being able to share that with my sister, it did make all the difference. And we both treasure the fact that we were both able to do that role. At some point, it is different, but it's not a bad thing.
Right. Well, and, if I'm being honest, it didn't really sit right with a lot of my family members.
Mm-hmm.
I have lost contact with many friends and family because of my decisions. So that's been a challenge on its own. For someone who has always wanted to be a people pleaser, for someone who doesn't deal well with rejection, it's been really difficult losing contact with family members who thinks I didn't necessarily make a good decision.
And what's interesting is I've learned a lot. Like, I don't need approval, and I would appreciate support, but I don't need it. And I can't help if you don't understand, and I can't help if you don't agree. And if you don't value and trust me enough to respect that this is my choice, whatever that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then it's probably best that we're good.
No, you're right, because everybody wanted to put a label on what I was doing. Oh, you're going through a midlife crisis, or you're just depressed, or you're confused, or you're leaving the best thing that's ever happened to you. It's like I heard everything, and I still had to choose me at the end of the day. And so I decided this last year is I was no longer going to live a life with labels. I have removed those labels from my life, and I'm living like that every day now, a life without labels.
I just don't believe that it is up to another person to define or label something that's important to me. And I use that when it comes to success. And you work with authors and entrepreneurs. And I believe that an entrepreneur is one who can truly define their own success and then work to achieve that. And that may be making a lot of money. That may be having time for themselves, whatever that is. But to have someone else come in and say, oh, that's not successful, I call BS on that. And same thing with the labels as you're talking about this. I define my happy. I define what it is for my life. And if that doesn't work for you, that's okay. But you don't put me in your box.
Yes, that has been a very big part of this transition for me, this transformation, because I have come to love this woman that I live with every day. She was someone that I was afraid to look at. She was someone I was afraid to be alone with. And when you're traveling alone, you're with yourself 24/7. You're also 100% responsible for every outcome. With the bad decisions that I had to take a look at and go, okay, so what am I going to do differently? I also got to pat myself on the back for everything I did right.
Yes.
It's like I am making my dreams come true. I have already checked off the number one item on my bucket list, which is Machu Picchu. I did that last year.
Wow.
And I am creating some amazing experiences for myself, and I get to own that.
Yes.
And I wasn't doing that before. I'm just like, oh, how cool that this happened. And I finally went, no, Rhonda, you did it. You did it yourself. And now that I'm owning it, it feels so different.
I am so pleased that we have gotten a chance to hear just a part of your story today. But I know there's so much more going on. Can you please make sure that my audience will know how to follow you and connect with you? And we'll make sure that any links you share get posted in the show notes. Can you tell everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, my profession is a book publisher, a book designer, a book coach, really an author coach. So Heartwork Publishing is my website for anyone who has a compelling story that they want to share with the world, because that is one of my passions, is sharing their message with the world. I also have a Facebook with Heartwork Publishing. My passion project is Heartwork Travels. I have a Facebook group called Heartwork Travels. And I'm also on Instagram for both Heartwork Travels and Heartwork Publishing. And the final piece is I have a website for Heartwork Travels. I have people who are sponsoring my journey. It's a lot of work with what I'm doing and the book I'm putting together. And I just feel so passionate about what I'm doing and the book that I'm writing. Heartwork Travels is a place for people to become sponsors with the book. And there's so much more to come. I'm not quite sure what that looks like right now, but I've decided I don't need to know. I'm on this amazing journey and it just gets better and better every day.
I love it. Rhonda, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wasn't it great to hear the stories that Rhonda shared with us today? It's important to remember that we are the only limiting factor to our possibilities. And we've reached the end of another episode, but the conversation doesn't have to end there. Remember to follow us on Facebook at transformviatravel.com. And if you like what you've heard, make sure to share it with your friends. Until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.